Hi, and welcome to the Otherworld Podcast. It's been months and months and months. Hi, Fee.
Hi, yes, it has. Hasn't it been an interesting start to the year? We sort of decided to dive into the podcast in this new way. And then, we've spent all of these months in this kind of liminal space, and it took us going out to Uluru again to kind of find our path forwards with it.
Yeah, I do love the way that we just kind of trust the unfolding of it. And really, when you look back on the year that has been, it was always going to happen after our trip, really.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of think of that start of the year as a sort of void space. It felt like we were just in some kind of holding pattern, and we weren't really moving forwards, we weren't going backwards, we were just sort of in this floating about in this liminal space. And it always felt like once we came back from Uluru, the year would start, and boy did it start. It was like we jumped into action on all sorts of things, which has been amazing.
It has. And for those of you that have followed us last year, we did do a weekly podcast last year where we kind of dove into intuitively into the energies of the week and the month ahead. And as we launched into this year, we had January off, and then we talked about, well, do we want to start up that again? And it just didn't feel right to do that anymore. It was fun. Like last year was fun doing that. And I think a lot of people really appreciated it and enjoyed it. But it kind of feels like the focus is shifted to our time on land, specifically out at the Red Centre.
Well, yes, exactly, because I think that's such an amazing time when we go out there, and there's so much that you and I personally gain from those experiences, as well as holding space for the beautiful women that come and share those experiences with us. And coming back this time, I mean, every time we've gone out, it's been a different experience for us, but coming back this time almost consolidated for me, for us, our path forwards and where we want to go with that work. So yes, there's so much to share around that, and it feels right to create that in a conversation today in the podcast.
Yeah, and I think if I could like kind of encompass the time that's that of going to Uluru, of spending time on that land and with the Indigenous people of that land, the first people. Probably purpose would be a big word I'd use. And I know that I've shifted so much in the time, in the 4 years that I've been going out there together with you and with the women that we take out there. And I've really shifted what I spend my time on. I mean, last year for me, other than doing the podcast with you and organizing the trip to Uluru, became all about art. And it was such a dramatic shift. I mean, art's always been there for me, but it was really spending time on creating, painting every day was a huge shift. Have you found something similar? Like, is purpose, how does that word sit with you?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, sorry, I don't know if my earphones have just done something a bit odd there, so I hope you can still hear me.
I can.
Good. Oh, absolutely. I mean, in fact, our last retreat was about rebirthing your purpose. That's what we felt really called to do. I mean, this has just grown in intensity for me every time we've gone out and every time we've reconnected with the Inanu people and rekindled that relationship and built on that relationship. It just makes me realize that, we're there as this beautiful bridge between our world and their world, and bringing people into that connection with them, and also them wanting to connect with us. And that's really defined for me personally what I want to do, what I want to spend my time doing now, what I feel really called to do. I mean, going out on land for me has always, for as long as I can remember, been the best way for me to process, to heal, to release, to clear what I've needed to on my own personal journey. And time again, I witness how powerful that is for other people too. So yes, it's really defined, I think, my purpose too, and our purpose alongside that.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, like I was saying before, the creativity piece, like I've done work with workshops and helping people sort of tap into that creative space and the messaging that gets put on us along the way, or we put on ourselves, that stops us in our creativity or in doing the thing that lights us up. And I guess that's the thing that's really been revealed to me, is that going out onto land, particularly that land, and slowing down really allows so much to surface, to be revealed, to be released. And then you come back with a whole different sense of what's important, of what you value, of what you want to kind of bring into the center. And I think that helps no matter what you're no matter what you do in life, what you want to do, this just reprioritizes. It kind of shifts focus.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, that stillness that you can find out there is so different to the stillness you can find, you know, when you're at home, when you're in your normal environment. It's almost like it deepens to a different level there. And that slowing down, you just can't help but slow down when you're in that energy. It's very strong, it's very powerful. And people notice it. I mean, we notice it shifting within us, even when we're on the plane arriving there. You can kind of feel yourself going into this different time, this different space, this different energy. And, you know, naturally, quite naturally, you slow down into it, especially if you're conscious around that, if you're on that journey. And it's in that place of stillness that we find everything we need to find. We find ourselves in that stillness. So, yes, for me, that's definitely one of the biggest calls to just getting away from the city, getting out onto the land, and getting to a place as powerful as the ones that we visit out there. I mean, Uluru, Kata Tjuta, Wataka, you know, Attila, they all have different energies, different powers, different sacredness to them that affects you and influences your energy in completely different ways. So it's a powerful journey through all of those different influences that is the part I enjoy the most.
Yeah, and the contrast, because let's not forget the Salt Lakes, which is one of the places that we really talk about, but it probably has almost had the most profound effect on a lot of the women that we've taken, including ourselves. And the contrast of that white, flat, almost desert, and then the, you know, massive red rocks that you get when you're on your walks around the different places, the contrast of that blue sky and the red and the dirt and the dryness, and the stillness, but also the incredible power that you feel from the land, and you know, the tiny little birds that are just so full of life and noise and chatter. It's just kind of interesting, all the contrast that you get when you visit a place like that.
Oh, absolutely. And yes, the Salt Lakes this time, I mean, we've visited them many times and we did it in a completely different way this time, which was so beautiful and so amazing. And for you and I, we had that experience before the immersion started. And so it was so powerful, so incredibly powerful, grounding. I was grounded and felt so centered in a way that I've never been able to achieve before. And that energy I can still tap into now. It's beautiful. I can feel that pulling me into the ground, even, you know, 3 weeks later. So it's just, yes, that in itself, I think every time we go, each of those places we visit changes in its intensity, changes in its relevance, and therefore changes the journey each time. And I strongly believe that that difference is created through the group of women who have chosen to journey at that point. They create actually the way that we journey through those places and the different influences that they bring for us.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting, Fee, when I think about the 4 times we've been out there, I guess almost in a way, because we didn't put too much time and thought into the journey before we got there, because we've learnt to kind of that it's going to morph and change every day because of the way that the people are out there and the land is. So we know to kind of let go and let the journey build itself day by day. But what surprised me this time, being the 4th time I've been in 4 years, was how incredibly different, but how much I got out of it. It was almost, I had an expectation that I'd just be taking women and it would be, be like be like the other times. I wasn't going to get as much out of it. But this time, in some ways, was probably the most profound time out of all of them. I mean, it's hard to quantify that. It's hard to compare them, but I'm surprised at how much I actually came back with from this particular trip.
Oh, wow. Yes. And I can totally empathize with that. I think, though, I've had a slightly different experience. I think every time I've gone out there, I've had such amazing things that have happened that have really shifted for me. And the power of those is beyond measure. As you say, it's immeasurable. I don't even know where I'd be now if I hadn't had those experiences. And each time it's been so different as well, in the way that it's happened. I mean, this time at a personal level, there were massive, huge shifts and awareness and big things, particularly for me at the physical level, but done with such gentleness and softness and support and love that it's almost like nothing really happened. It's kind of like I look back at those incredibly powerful moments and think, did that even really happen? It was so big, but it's been so soft and gentle that I'm still almost kind of pinching myself a little bit at the moment and saying, that has shifted. It's really shifted. It's completely different now. So this time, I think, and I know last time I went out, it was quite intense for me. There was a few days before the women came where it was a very intense energy that affected me quite a lot. But this time it was very different. So yes, I can totally empathize with that.
I kind of want to talk a little bit about the local people, the traditional owners, the Ananu that we've met. And the book I'd suggest to anyone who's interested in learning about this place is I Am Uluru. And both Fee and I have read that. I'm reading it again for the 2nd time, and it's just as powerful, if not more so. I'm learning more and more and more. But that there's this piece of I Am Uluru being that there is no difference between the people out there and the land. That there is no separation. Hence the title, I Am Uluru. And God, don't you get that kind of feeling when you meet and you spend time? And that time, like as you and I know, that time is often completely in silence. There's not a lot of conversations. I mean, there are some, but there's a lot of the conversations that happen without words. And it's that being still enough to communicate, I guess, in the way that you do with land, because that's a very still conversation, in a way that's kind of reflected in how we communicate with the local people.
Oh my goodness, yes. I mean, that has been one of the biggest, deepest joys of my life, actually, is connecting with the Inanu people and actually having those moments, those really precious but powerful moments with them. And I remember the first time that we were asked to come out and sit at Uluru, out at the resort actually, with several of the women elders, and they were sitting in this sort of semicircle and we sat in front of them. And it was the first time that we'd really kind of connected with them in that way. And all we did was sit and we just, watched and listened and didn't really speak or ask anything, but I could feel them feeling me, and I and I knew that they were reading me in that beautiful clairsentient way that they could do. And all I could do in that moment was open my heart and be read, be witnessed, be, whatever they use as a frame of reference for that. And it was just a beautiful moment, and maybe lasted 10 or 15 minutes, and then we went back inside again, and just, it was like, wow, that was amazing. And not a word was spoken. It was just beautiful. I mean, I think we were introduced, we were given all of their names, and we were given our names, and that was really all we said. But it was such a beautiful and powerful moment for me.
I know, and that's kind of been the way it has been when we've been introduced to any of the Ananu. I remember the very first time I walked into the art centre, and there were all the women there painting, and Nancy, who we're going to have on this podcast. We've got to have Nancy on here, an English woman who works out there and has been, living out there for the last 3, 4, 5 years. I'm not even sure how long, but actually lives in Mutijulu with the Ananu, the locals. So she has just an amazing perspective on life out there. But when I walked into the art centre and met Nancy, there was the sense of, oh, you want to work with women out here, or you want to bring women out here to meet some of the local women. And then there was that, oh, let me talk to them. And then there was that silence and that feeling of being read in the silence, and just feeling like all I could do was open and be as transparent as possible in terms of my intentions of why I wanted to be out there. And I so understand through the time that we've been going back and forth that there's been such a lot of trauma and a lot of pain associated in dealing with white people that travel out there and that have taken land out there, and so I think that building up of trust and that time and spent in silence with them for them to understand our intentions and reasons is so important at building that bridge, as we talked about, at taking the people with the right intentions out there to meet with them.
Oh, absolutely. And it's such a precious relationship that has been built over many years, and it's been built through, I think, our awareness that we need to build that trust. We need for them to trust that we've got this intention, that we want to learn. We needed to show them that we had women that felt the call to land, to come and be with the land and to learn from them, the way that they work with the land, or the way that they are the land. I mean, work doesn't seem to be the right word, the way they live with the land. And that has been a process, a gentle, very gentle process of building that relationship over time, which has been so precious. And I know I'm very conscious of the fact we're still building that relationship now, and each time we go, a little bit more is revealed to us, and it kind of always blows us away, because we think, oh, why weren't we told that piece before? And it just deepens, and it gives us the next piece for the next journey. Every single time that has happened to us, we've got that next piece for the next journey. And so each time we come back, we've got the excitement around, the journey's looking like this now, and this is where we're going with it. And we've trusted that. I think that's the piece that we're very good at, is trusting and not pushing for anything that isn't ready to be revealed to us, just waiting and allowing that to happen. And so it has developed into this really beautiful relationship with them that I feel very honored to kind of have.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that reminded me of, and one was in the Ananu culture, or it may go to the broader Aboriginal people, is asking questions is can be considered rude, that's not the way that they have a conversation. That's not the way that they teach. That's not the way that they teach their young. It's more just an unfolding, and it happens when it's ready to happen, and it comes from observing rather than asking questions. And I kind of think that you and I were uniquely positioned to be these two people in that respect, because we kind of, the sitting and the waiting has been quite comfortable really for us to do. But when I read that book, I Am Uluru, and the journalist is talking about that piece of like, oh, you know, having to really curb the questions and letting the story unfold, because there's a very knowledgeable way that they're giving the information that they give when you're ready to hear what you're ready to hear, and trusting that, because you're right, we've been given all these little pieces. It's like, wow, if we'd known that 3 years ago, but we weren't ready to know that 3 years ago. We're ready to know that now. And it's quite incredible the way it's morphed, and we have got little breadcrumbs along the way to where we are now.
Oh, absolutely. And it just also defines, I think, as we were saying earlier on, along with the women that feel called to each journey, there also feels that, you know, that bridge piece. So we bring those women and the Ananu meet us with that, you know, wherever they're at, whatever they're ready to reveal at that time too. It always seems to be this beautiful meeting of something that deepens that journey each time. I mean, you and I are the fortunate ones that we get to do each journey anyway, so we can see how that builds. But each journey for the group of women that we take out there is such a unique and individual experience based on who they are and what they're coming and what their intention is for their journey out to land as well. And it feels like they match us, the Inanu people match us wherever we're at with that, and then very gently give us the next piece for the next one. They just drop that in at the end, which is always beautiful.
Yeah, the very first group that we took out there in 2020, we were known as the group because we were the first and biggest group that had out there after the lockdown, you know, the COVID lockdown. And that was, I think, a really tough time for everyone. I mean, everyone, but also for the locals there, because there wasn't the amount of tourists or money coming into the community. And the art centre was completely closed down. So for us to be one of the first groups there were so many blessings in that time that I recall. Number one, virtually having every place to ourselves when we would go there. So, you know, walking Uluru Base and really not having anybody be there in all the sacred places at the Mudajula Waterhole or you know, at Kanju Gorge. It was just basically us and Uluru, and then having the art centre open up for just our group and seeing all the artwork that they created in the time that no one had been there, and the beautiful the artists all being there, and the exchanges that happened between artists and the women that came on the immersion with us was, oh my God, it's one of those moments I will never forget. Was the moment of what happened in that room as an exchange between those local artists and the women that came with us. Can you, I'd love to know about it from your perspective.
Well, I mean, when I reflect back on it, the only thing I can think of, the word that describes it, is magical. It was just one of those magic moments that I don't know if it can ever be repeated in the same way. And I think if I look at the last trip we've been on as well, there are other magic moments there. I think it's just the gift that they bring to us is these moments of magic. But that one in particular was just, it was, I think for me, going back out there after the lockdown and after such a beautiful sacred place had been left alone basically for so long. It was almost like it had been given given new breath, breathe new life into. It was just, it had such a different feeling. And that had come across after, first of all the tourists climbing on Uluru, and then the climb being stopped, and then going into lockdown, and then there was this journey even around that, which created all these different shifts in the energy there. And so that time when we went out, even the moment we set foot there, it felt magical. And then everything that unfolded in that journey just kind of matched that in some way. And that was like the pinnacle of the journey for me, just going into that space. And we had no real idea what to expect. I think it was just such a completely beautiful surprise that those women came in and sat with us and gave us their time, because we didn't know that was even possible. And I think the women that we had taken out had had such an amazing journey, that they were in this beautiful space of gratitude and receiving. And it was almost electric, the energy in that room. That's what it felt like to me. It just felt electric. Just that beautiful feeling you get when something big is happening and you're not, you weren't expecting it. It was that for me. It was all of that. And I think we all went away from that feeling completely blown away by the experience. And I know for me, it's one of those moments I'll carry in my heart forever. And I'm sure for all of the women that were there, it will be the same.
And just for those who and don't know what happened, that because of the lockdown, there was an enormous amount of art that was all over the floor, all over tables, all up on walls. And the women, our group of women came in. There was about, I think, 15 of us, and when the artwork was being looked through, these women were like openly crying when they found the piece that spoke to them, that they wanted to take home. And we were probably there for a couple of hours, and it was just piece after piece. These women were just finding and crying, and it was just amazing, and buying, which just put this in, a good amount of money into the community. So the artists were there, seeing their work be so appreciated, and also seeing people, these women, being moved by it so much. They were in this joy state, also having contact finally after a long period of time, and seeing their work be appreciated, but also bought. It was just this beautiful exchange between the women and the artists that no, I don't know that moment will ever be repeated. But I think what happened in that room set the tone for what happened when we've been out a couple of times since then, but for the next group that we took out there, in that when we walked back into that room after a couple of years, all the artists who before were quite shy and wouldn't actually sort of meet your eye and wouldn't sort of speak directly to you, called out to us when we walked in the door. It was like a coming home. There was just conversations, there was excitement, it was a complete recognition of who we were. And I think we hadn't realized how much impact that moment had had until we took another group back out there and heard the stories. And then for that group to be able to paint with them, with the local artists, that was another very, very cool moment for us.
Oh, I mean, this trip was just, yes, a completely different experience, and such a beautiful experience. We had a couple of really beautiful, intimate sessions with the local people. That was, I think, again, just such a beautiful experience for all of us. And yes, to sit with these women and, well, men, there was a couple of men there as well, but to sit with the artists and just learn from them and laugh with them. I mean, one of the things that I'm learning about the beautiful people out there is they're so funny, and they love to laugh, and they've got such a good and quite wicked sense of humor as well, which is really starting to come across now. And and just the joyfulness in that is beautiful. What prepared to share with us and to be so open with us. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, and that, as you said, one of the men that shares with us, Philip, he took us to the Mudajula waterhole and told us a lot of the stories. And I guess it's that piece, it's the storytelling through the art, because there's specific ways that they paint, and there's storytelling through the marks on the rock, the drawings on the rocks, everything, and with the different birds. There's just so much storytelling in that people, because it isn't a written language, it's a spoken language. So all of their stories are passed on. And something new that I learned was that each one has a different part of a story. So they would paint their part of Turkapa or the lore or the story, depending on where they were born and who they were born from and what story they were given or what animal they've been given. That was fascinating and such an amazing thing to learn about.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And I think this is just what's happening each time we go out. Something more is being revealed. We're learning more each time as well, which makes it joyful. But they're sharing more with us as well, which is the beautiful thing. It just always feels so matched, it always feels so balanced, which I love, of course. But it's just that beautiful, I guess, a flow of giving and receiving that I feel is, again, it's like that connection with the land. We give to the land, we receive from the land. It's just exactly the same thing, but that just seems to be becoming much more conscious within me now. That beautiful flow, it's the only word I can use really for it, that beautiful flow of what those journeys bring for us and for them, between us.
And then there's the walks, because we do a whole lot of walking at all different sites. And I mean, some of the women do longer walks and they all walk at different paces. And probably, Kings Canyon, the walk at Kings Canyon, and when you go down to the Garden of Eden, which is just this beautiful pool of water in the middle of the canyon, that place, I mean, they're all amazing, but I had a beautiful, I think it was after we'd spent some time with Philip and his wife, Umaji, and then we went to Wataka National Park in Kings Canyon, and there's the very first part of the walk is 500 steps, but they're not, your normal steps. They're all different, rocks and different level climbing. And it's quite an overwhelming thing to stand at the bottom of and see it above you. And it's kind of like this moment of, okay, I mean, I know a lot of the women were, I'm going to do this. And we've seen women crawl up there because of the fear of heights. Not that because I have a fear of heights. So it's not necessarily that it gives you that sensation, but for some people it can. It's that in itself is an enormous walk, that one.
Yeah, I mean, the walks are such a big part of the immersion, because I think each place we visit and each walk we do changes every time we're there as well, in terms of what I receive from it. And sometimes some of those places, excuse me, are more powerful than they are at other times. And I think for me, this time was the Salt Lake was just so incredible for me when we were on the Salt Lake. That was just such an incredible experience. But the walks themselves, there never needs to be any fear around coming on these immersions and not being able to do the walks, because we actually suit everybody's needs. So if the longer or the bigger walks don't appeal, or through physical health you don't feel that you could do them, there's always other ways to journey through those places, and we'll always look, there's always different options. So
yep.
Sometimes we do shorter ones, or we can do shorter ones, and there's 3 of us that support the group of women out there. There's always someone that can take a different option with you. So if you're at all called to these journeys and that is one of your fears, I think it's something to just let go of and talk to us about, because it's definitely something that we can work with for different people. And having done most of the shorter walks that there are there that we've experienced before, I know that they're just as powerful, just as beautiful in the experience as the longer walks can be.
Well, one of the most probably challenging, but also amazing walks is Kata Tjuta. And this time when we walked Kata Tjuta, I went to a certain point and where you can see down the valley, and chose to walk back, which was an easier walk. I guess I wanted to experience what that would be like, and if you get as much out of that walk by doing it that way. And I loved it because I got this whole different version of the walk on when I returned the same way that I came. And so much had changed in that part that it was just beautiful to spend time on that particular part of the walk. So Kata Tjuta can be a large walk, particularly when you go out and down into the valley. But there's options there so that you can really experience it as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think every place that we visit has 1, 2, or 3 different options that we can work with. So it just makes it, it's more about being there and, having a beautiful intention around being there than being able to physically do all of the walking. However, if you want to, that option there, of course. Some of these I didn't do all of the walks, the big walks this time, and don't feel like I missed out on anything at all through doing that. So yes, I think it's good to just bear that in mind, because they're such a big part of the journey, but they are not the only part, and they don't have to be done in their entirety for you to get something from them, to get what you need from them.
I can't wait to have Nancy on here and hear some of her stories, because I know every time we go out there, Nancy's a little bit the same. She kind of gives us feeds us these beautiful stories. Each time we go, it's like, oh, didn't I tell you about that? It's like, no, but it's amazing to hear the story. I mean, one in particular about a snake, but we won't go into it. We'll let Nancy tell her own stories. But, I can remember after hearing Nancy and her saying to us, well, you're building up your stories. And it was kind of like, oh, and then when we look back, there has just been so many rich moments and so many synchronistic moments, so many pieces that fit into this amazing story that we're personally building up out there. Is there one, like something around a story that you feel to share?
I think for me, it was maybe, if my memory is correct, it's the first time you came out there, the first time we went out together, and we arrived on the day that they were taking out the last stake from the walk. And we were at Uluru to watch the sunset. We had no idea that this ceremony was going on, but we actually were there at the time that was, and they took one of the elders up in a helicopter, and she did the ceremony, and then they removed the stake, and then they came back and picked her up. And that was just astonishing that we actually landed that day on the day that was happening. And then a couple of days later, we actually met the man who was responsible for creating the walk and putting
the first stake in.
Yes, and it was just this beautiful kind of synchronistic journey we had. I mean, it was just, and that whole, I mean, there's so many stories that come out of that journey, but those were the two that kind of, for me, just kind of reinforced everything, because they gave 2 different sides of the story, which I love. You had this different perspective of it all, which you can then work with in a more conscious way. So I think for me, those two moments were pivotal in how I've really processed the journeys that we take women out to do.
I know, and that's that piece, like just those two stories, that piece brings up so much for me, because on that, that first trip that we took together, we had no idea. We kind of knew, that it was finishing, but we had no idea, or that we knew when the rock was, the climb was stopping, but that had happened already. So we had no idea. In fact, when we saw the helicopter over Uluru, we were both appalled that something was flying over Uluru airspace. And then we saw it land, and not having any context for why. It wasn't until a couple of days later that we realized that we witnessed one of the Ananu actually removing the last post from the top, which was just blew us away that we happened to arrive on that day. And then, as you say, meeting from the station close by, the man who was then in his 90s, like he's no longer with us, he's passed. So the weirdness of us also meeting the man who put the first stake in on that same trip, a couple of days apart, and I look again to the book, I Am Uluru, and that station has the land that has Attila or Mount Connor on it. So it's actually owned by the station. And Mount Connor has such a big part of the unfolding story of that area and the Uluru story. So having the pieces that we do in this huge story of what went on once white people changed the course of that land, it's kind of overwhelming in a way, and also humbling that we've kind of been given the opportunity to meet these important pieces in history and the history of that land. Yeah. I mean, because that then came to a culmination when we met Reggie Uluru, who is on the cover of that book. So really feeling the completeness of seeing it from so many different people.
Yeah, I think we just seem to keep getting these little key pieces, these little breadcrumbs that just keep almost dropping in our lap, really. I mean, I'm always blown away at just how easy everything we don't even look for it and it just comes in. It's beautiful. And kind of was a little bit overwhelming, as you say, in the beginning, because it was just like, what, us? Why are we getting all of this information and these connections? And why is it so easy? It was kind of one of the things that I think we both in our own ways questioned a little bit in the beginning. But yes, it just feels like we've been given access to little parts of history that are either things that have happened or things that are going to happen or things that are happening now, so that we can sort of we have just a really broad perspective of the stories there, because we're becoming, in our own very small, tiny way, part of the story in some way as we bring women out to land. Everyone that travels out there, everyone that goes there, aside from coming with us with an intention to want to learn from these beautiful people and want to learn from the land, is part of that story of where we're going now. And it's that willingness and desire to learn that I think is helping the Inanu people meet us there. And it just feels like in some small way we're part of that, part of where everything is going next, and it's part of our Chukapa, and and it's beautiful as we start to piece it all together and speak it in the way that the Inanu people do.
Yeah, and there's I think as we're at an hour, so it's probably a good amount of time, but I kind of wanted to just speak to a couple of the sentences that have really stayed with me. What I love about when any of the Ananu speak to you, it's good. It has this weight to it. And Philip has shared a few really beautiful but profound sentences that are simple, but when you sit with them, you can feel the weight of them. And I remember the very first time we met him, and we talked about bringing women out there, and he talked about bringing them onto his homeland and showing them. I think he's talked about wanting to show them how happy they are, and how and yeah, there was just that how much they are happy. They are love the way they live. There was something in that, but he said, I want, about the women coming out there, he said, I want to show them who they are. And it was really simple. It was a really simple sentence. And when you consider that they don't consider themselves separate from the land, it really has this beautiful feeling, because it's kind of what happens when you're out there. Everything strips away, and you can feel more the authenticness without all the stories and without all the bullshit that you can feel when you're living, in a city or with lots of people around you, or with all the expectations of family. That was such a huge statement. And then there was also, I know one that I loved was when he said, when you talk, you don't listen. Just the simplicity of that. I mean, it's true, but it's just the way he said it was just like, yeah. Yeah.
I know has a way with his words that just seems to get straight to the point. And I remember when he first said that to us, you and I were talking to him about, we're bringing women out to land, and we were going into these big long explanations around what we thought that journey would be, and he just said that to us, I will show them who they are. And I think we looked at each other and thought, oh, okay, that's it.
Okay, whatever you say.
Big explanation. Yeah. That's exactly it. Yes, thanks, Philip.
And there was also the statement when he said, the last thing he said to us, which was, see you when you get back. And it seems so simple, but what with him is that we'll almost go out of his mind until we pop back in and we're there, because they live so much in the present moment that it's just,
Yes.
Time has a whole different relevance. So see you when you get back was just cutting straight to the way it will be.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think just everything that he says is so true, and so how they work as a people. You don't talk, you listen. There's not too many words spoken, but just feel into those words and bring them in within you, and hear them that way, hear them in your body, and allow them to integrate fully. And that's all you need to do. It's beautiful and powerful.
I'm looking forward to where this goes, this new version of our podcast. I know we're going to have a few different people that are relevant, like Nancy talking about her life out there. And we've also got one in the bag that we really want to share with another woman that's spent a lot of time on land and in a different part of Australia. I'm kind of excited as to where we go, and a bit like our trips out there, we almost don't have any idea yet. It will unfold as we go, but this feels complete to me. How about you?
Oh, absolutely. That was a beautiful conversation, and I hope that everyone's enjoyed it. And if you want to connect with us in any way or share any of your experiences out on the land, we'd be really happy to hear from you as well.
Yeah, or writing questions, whether it's on the podcast, on iTunes, or whether it's on the YouTube channel, because we'll post it to both, or emailing us, or finding us on our website, which I've got to update, by the way, to find out more about our next trip out there, which will be October, but we'll also have another one in the early part of next year as well. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you, anything that this brought up for you, or any questions that you have. Till next week.
Yeah.